Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 28, Text number 20. Tasmil labda padam chitam sarvavaya vasamstitam vilakshya katrasam yujad ange bhagavato muni tasmil labda padam chitam sarvavaya vasamstitam vilakshya katrasam yujad ange bhagavato muni tasmil labda padam chitam sarvavaya vasamstitam vilakshya katrasam yujad ange bhagavato muni tasmil labda padam chitam sarvavaya vasamstitam vilakshya katrasam yujad ange bhagavato muni tasmin on the form of the Lord labda padam fixed Chitam, the mind, Sarva, all, Avyava, limbs, Samstitam, fixed upon, Vilakshya, having distinguished, Ekatra, in one place, Samyujad, should fix the mind, Ange, on each limb, Bhagavata, of the Lord, Muni, the sage. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In fixing his mind on the eternal form of the Lord, the yogi should not take a collective view of all his limbs, but should fix the mind on each individual limb of the Lord. Purport. The word Muni is very significant. Muni means one who is very expert in mental speculation or in thinking, feeling, and willing. He is not mentioned here as a devotee or yogi. Those who try to meditate on the form of the Lord are called munis or less intelligent, whereas those who render actual service to the Lord are called bhakti yogis. The thought process described below is for the education of the muni. In order to convince the yogi that the absolute truth or supreme personality of Godhead is never impersonal at any time, the following verses prescribe observing the Lord in his personal form, limb after limb. To think of the Lord as a whole may sometimes be impersonal. Therefore, it is recommended here that one first think of his lotus feet, then his ankles, then the thighs, then the waist, then the chest, then the neck, then the face, and so on. One should begin from the lotus feet and gradually rise to the upper limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord. Amagyanatamrandasya Gyanangana Shalakaya Chakshuranmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, and my spiritual mind is kindly opening my eyes with the torchlight. My Alpha Mary speak with essence of unto him. So some very interesting points here made by Srila Prabhupada. First of all, he's talking about the Muni. He's defining who is a Muni, what is the definition of a Muni, and he also defines this quite clearly in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 2, verse 56. And he explains, he gives the distinction between an ordinary Muni and what he describes as a Stita Deer Muni. And there's quite a difference. And he's also mentioning here about a regular so-called Muni. So in that verse, it's Krishna defining the Muni. He explains that a Muni or a great sage is someone, there's three qualities of the Muni, is that he's undisturbed despite the threefold miseries. Those threefold miseries are the miseries from the demigods, the miseries of other living entities, and the miseries of the mind and the body. So a Muni is someone who is not disturbed by these miseries that are inflicted upon the conditioned soul. He's also not elated in happiness. As much as Vashastakundaya, Satoshna Sukadukata, Agama Painonitya, Stams Tadikshashabharata. That the Muni is not affected by distress or happiness. And we know the pastime of how Jayadratha lost, how Duryodhana lost the battle because of they thought that they had defeated Arjuna, and in that moment of elation, that was the time that Krishna told Arjuna to take advantage of that weakness. Often when we get excited at times of happiness, we lose opportunities, or we become distracted from our duty, or distracted from what is the task at hand. And also freedom from attachment, fear and anger. So those three qualities bind us to this material world, and a Muni is free from those. Because this is Krishna's definition of the Muni, and Prabhupada elaborates in the purport about how a Muni, in general scholarship circles, the Muni is someone, you have a circle of thinkers, and they agitate their minds to come up with different points of view. Sometimes I think of it like when you're wanting to move the furniture around in the house, and you agitate your mind to see it from a different angle, see it as if north is south and west is east, and or also you go to Mayapur and you suddenly realise that north is south, and you have to agitate your mind to see it differently from the perspective of the poles. And so this is what the Munis do, is that they agitate their minds to see it in a more deeper way, and see different precepts from the scriptures and from different angles of vision. And now there's a difference between these types of thinkers and the devotional thinker. Actually, the Stita Dera Muni is someone who has, it's written here, so it's written in the Bhagavad Gita, has exhausted all business of creative speculation. Now, some things that Prabhupada says, or even especially in the Bhagavatam, relate to a different age. But this particular sentence is fully relatable to us here in this particular, decade, so to speak, where we're encouraged to speculate creatively, come up with different business proposals, different ways of thinking and creating different art. Art is a complete manipulation of the mind, how we can, do things completely differently. So here, Prabhupada said he has exhausted all business of creative speculation and has fixed the mind with the conviction that Lord Krishna is everything. And so this is a little revolutionary, especially in education, that an advanced thinker would actually have exhausted this creativity of the mind. So we can understand that the qualities, the character of a person to be developed is actually a much deeper and broader goal than the type of goals that we're given in modern education. And it is, which is, to make our place in the world, to make, a good enterprise, etc., etc. But actually to have developed a steter, dear mentality where the mind is fixed on the conviction that Krishna is everything, and what to speak of being equipoised in happiness and distress, and free from fear, attachment and anger. These goals are massive because we're actually constantly in association with those qualities. We're constantly fearful, attached and angry. So this is where Prabhupada's wanting to drive us really, drive our endeavour to develop this type of mentality and thinking, and it is revolutionary. So there are two munis that are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as the greatest munis of all time. Who are they? Question for everybody. Who are the two munis that considered the greatest munis?
Narada Muni?
Yep, that's correct. Narada Muni is one of them. He's defined by Prabhupada as the greatest devotee in the universe.
Who's the... If he's called a Muni or not.
What does it begin with?
Huh?
What does it begin with?
Brihaspati Muni?
What was that?
What does it begin with?
B. But it's not Brihaspati.
I knew it began with B.
Yeah. It's B. It's Bhrigu Muni.
Bhrigu Muni.
Yeah.
That's right. Because we don't say Brihaspati. We don't say
Brihaspati Muni. Yeah.
Because he wasn't a Muni, I guess. He was somebody else. Bhrigu Muni.
Bhrigu Muni,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you.
Bhrigu Muni was the first and most powerful son of Brahma. And he was the most powerful son of Lord Brahma. And
Shiva?
yeah, well, that's what it says. It said in the Gita that he was the most powerful. Yeah, and so Bhrigu Muni. So we remember the pastime of how Bhrigu Muni decided that he wanted to find out who actually was God, and he went and tested Lord Shiva, his brother, and his father, Lord Brahma, and then he came to Vishnu. And so when I was thinking about this pastime, I was thinking, actually, Bhrigu Muni, even though he's defined as the greatest Muni, he actually is glorifying Krishna as the supreme Muni, because Krishna was not agitated when he kicked him in the chest. And so the Lord himself is also, he's the greatest Muni, because he was, when Bhrigu was kicking him in the chest, he just said, "Oh, I hope, my dear Bhrigu, that your foot was not hurt by my hard chest." And when we think about that in relationship to the Lord, we think, well, that's actually natural, that's Krishna's quality. But actually, in relation to most souls who would respond to being kicked in the chest, it's actually a very difficult quality to maintain an equilibrium when being attacked. So Bhrigu Muni was great in the sense that he obviously understood what it meant to be a Muni, because that was how he constructed his test. He went and agitated these great souls, attempted to agitate them, and even Lord Brahma became agitated because it was his son who ignored him only. But this was how we can understand how great is Bhrigu Muni, because Krishna had that potency and focus and presence to be able to have constructed that whole test against his own father as Lord Brahma, and Shiva as, but knowing how powerful Lord Shiva is, to simply glorify Vishnu, to glorify the Lord as the greatest. So this is how Prabhupada defines the real Munis, that they understand that Krishna is everything. The other Muni, Narada Muni, he is considered the greatest devotee in the universe. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, he's talking to his disciple Vyasadeva. And he is telling Vyasadeva how he became attracted to the life of a transcendentalist. And Prabhupada explains that Narada Muni was considered relatively normal young boy who, without any education or wealth or status, his father had died early, and his mother was raising him in a little cottage. And then these great sages came. And these great sages were great because they had a taste for the unceasing devotional service of the Lord. And so Narada Muni took the remnants of those sages, and that was how he became attracted to the transcendental life. And and then Prabhupada explains, Acharyavan Purusho Veda, an association of the great acharyas. Acharyavan Purusho Veda, and through that association, the glory of devotional service is directly perceived, which is prakashaha. So prakashaha means that it's a direct perception of the glories of devotional service. And when you have that direct perception, that prakashaha, then your mind becomes totally fixed, and it's fixed on serving the Lord. And this is what Prabhupada then goes on to say in this, after he defines the Muni in this purport. He gives a very interesting little wow, so to speak. So those who try to meditate on the form of the Lord are called Munis, or less intelligent, whereas those who render actual service to the Lord are called bhakti yogis. So this conviction and fixed understanding about service to the Lord is the higher platform. So why then? The natural question is: so why do we meditate? So why then does it go on to talk about this whole meditation? Because that's what these next verses are all about: how to meditate on the Lord. If Prabhupada says that there. So these next verses are specifically, and then Prabhupada has said here also, the thought process described below is for the education of the Muni. So the Srimad Bhagavatam in these particular chapters and verses is meant to convince people from the impersonal platform to the personal process of devotional service, and step by step. So here, this process of meditating on the Lord is meant to be given to an impersonalist, and then they become fixed through a realization of Krishna through that meditation. So their inclination to meditate is dovetailed in meditating on the Lord, but it's a process that's meant to bring them to this level of devotional service. And what's so interesting is that this is the step-by-step message of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And when you go to the Bhagavad Gita, and this is how we can really understand how great Srila Prabhupada is, because in each purport, practically speaking, Prabhupada talks about devotional service to Krishna. If you look at it, every single page, Prabhupada talks about bhakti yoga and devotional service to the Lord. He's bringing people immediately to this platform, and then here in his purports. And why did Prabhupada do that? Because here Sukadeva Goswami or Kapila Dev, thank you, excuse me, Kapila Dev, they're talking to, giving a gradual process of meditation, and so that then gradually the yogi becomes fixed, the mind becomes fixed, and then they have this, what's awakened is a spontaneous desire to serve their beloved, or to serve this Lord who has attracted their minds. And so Srila Prabhupada's giving this to us directly, and it's been explained. Someone mentioned to Srila Prabhupada, or he said that he's written this Bhagavad Gita so that someone on the street can open it up at any page and get the topmost knowledge, which is devotional service, and which is purely Prabhupada's mercy, Srila Prabhupada's mercy. And this is our real life experience of Acharyavan Purusho Veda, an association of the great Acharya. And I was showing a video of Srila Prabhupada to the girls, to my class. And Srila Prabhupada is just so charismatic, and so his mind is just so fixed. It's just a very different darshan, so to speak, of a human being when you see Srila Prabhupada. That we can understand that he was really coming from a different world. So here Prabhupada's talking about the difference between bhakti yogis and munis. And in that 256 purport, he talks about how a Stita Deya Muni is daring and active in the service of the Lord and dedicated in serving Krishna. And I was thinking of that personality in Dwarka. I think his name is Daruka, who was the servant of the Lord. I'm not sure what his name began with D. I think it's Daruka. He was serving the Lord, and he was serving him with a chamara fan. And the ecstatic emotions that were coming up from seeing Krishna and his service was almost overwhelming, but he pushed those feelings down so that he could continue his service. And so this is the devotee. And then the other personality is Ambarish Maharaj, and how he didn't show any anger in response to Devasamuni's curse. And this is another personality in the Bhagavad Gita that Prabhupada describes, that he was fixed in the process of devotional service, all his different aspects to himself, was all meditating on, engaged in service of the Lord. He would go to the temple, walk to the temple, take darshan of the Lord, clean the temple, do everything that was in relation to serving the Lord. And when he was tested by Devasamuni, then he didn't show any anger at all. In fact, he was just thinking how he could pacify Devasamuni. So here it says also, Prabhupada says here that to think of the Lord as a whole may sometimes be impersonal, and therefore it is recommended here that one first think of his lotus feet, then his ankles, his thighs, his waist, his chest, his neck, and the face, and so on. So I was trying to understand what this means, because how would looking at Krishna as a whole person be impersonal? So I came up with some thoughts, but I just thought I'd open it up because I'm not exactly sure. Why would looking at Krishna, I'm only thinking in perspective of a sort of mundane, loving sort of context, but anyone else have any ideas?
Well, there's so many aspects, right, as qualities. We're simply listed in the nectar of devotion. But yeah, when we're doing our meditation, it can be very, quite distant, I guess, distant or impersonal, like very general, I guess is another word. It's not but those, and we're not really appreciating that, it's a person.
The details.
And what it smells like, and these sort of other aspects that are there.
Right.
So it can be just the form of the Lord and nothing else about it.
Right, yeah. So
again, it's all just levels of progress.
Right, so that's a good point, that when we see, there's more of a distance, it creates a distance when you're seeing someone from a distance or as a whole, and whereas devotional service is intimate and the details. But so Prabhu was talking about how, just like in the Nectar of Devotion, as you read it on, there's just so many details come up, and someone said also that love is in the details, right? When you're doing your service and you're really focusing on the details, and so this is the difference. Whereas if it's more of a whole meditation, then it's more general and distant.
It's like when we talk about a mountain, and then as you get closer to the mountain, the trees and the birds and the
Right, yeah. So exactly. So the example of the mountain, yeah. When you see it from a distance, you see it as a whole, but when you get closer up, you see all the details. Yes, that's great. Yeah, I was thinking about it in similar point as in relation to the class, when you have the children come up and they, one child is looking at you from a distance and the other one is right here sort of wanting to, cuddle up. This is what I was thinking. This is kind of like the love is more there and sort of like playing with your clothes or, with your arm or whatever like that. There you can feel more affection from that child than the one who's like watching you from a distance. But that was what came to
me. The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
What was that?
So the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
I would just add that actually on that line, that the philosophical understanding of Krishna, that Krishna has an infinite number of forms, but he's completely full and present in all of his forms, even though they're playing a different role. That applies to his own body as well. The idea that Prabhupada explains that like in the beginning of the Ishopanishad, I can't quote it properly, but Om Purnamidam
Purnam Udachyate.
That Krishna explains, or Prabhupada explains in the purport that Krishna is the complete whole, and when you can take away any part of the whole, and the whole is still there, both present in the part that you took away and in the original. And so Krishna is always completely full in that way. And so we have, all these different incarnations of Krishna that play particular roles, but that even though you limited Krishna to a particular role, he's still there fully in all that he's done. So like Krishna can, every sense is as full as every other sense. So Krishna can eat with his eyes, or eat by hearing prayers, etc., etc. So anyway, focusing on one, part of Krishna's body at the time is another way to experience Krishna's, plenary wholeness, that fullness of Krishna. That's the difference between God and us. So otherwise, we have a tendency to idolize or anthropomorphize everything. Everything is connected to us in that way. In other words,
yeah, that's a very good point.
Between fantasizing and meditating, I think.
Yeah. Speculating.
Fantasizing is natural, but we should use our higher intelligence and instructions from the Munis actually to meditate on the complete reality. Like it's easy to fantasize about the opposite sex, but really it's a lot better to meditate on, that there'll be babies coming, and how you're going to educate them, and what's their life really going to be like. What are the consequences if you treated another person who's the mother or father of your children like an object? You're doomed for your future. There's a whole, in other words, everybody has a whole life of all their future. And of course, Krishna is all lives. So.
Yeah, it's a really good point that you make, that Krishna is quite distinctly different from everybody else, all of us anyway. And that's the thing. I think we sometimes try to understand it from our own experience, but we can never really understand completely, obviously, who is Krishna in relation to our own personal experience, and that always has to be in the back of our minds. And it's just, he'll always forever be beyond our experience to understand him completely. But yeah, and also the other point that you're making about his, when you were talking, I was thinking how Srila Prabhupada was saying that when you're talking about Om Purnamida Purnamidam, that everything in the spiritual world, I was just reading this morning, that everything in the spiritual world is fresh. Everything is fresh, like the garlands that Krishna wears, that flower, I think it was just further back here, that flower is so fresh that the bees buzz around it, because it's not like our experience of the flower where you pick it and it starts to automatically wilt, but actually in the spiritual realm the flower maintains its freshness. So and then Prabhupada explains how 1 + 1 = 1 and 1 minus, it's all like complete, like it's not our experience, our conditioned, ingrained experience is degeneration, whereas everything to do with Krishna is fresh, and this is just something that although we can understand by the Lord's mercy what freshness is, which is what's pretty amazing, that we can understand what is fresh. But so therefore, because we have an experience of freshness, then we can put our minds to that and think, wow, Krishna is continually, and everything about Krishna is continually fresh. So that's just really enlivening, and can help us to fix our minds on this goal, to return there. And yeah, so then all of these things. And a very interesting point as well about Krishna's different incarnations, that within his incarnations he is complete, his personality is there. That's also a very nice thought, that he is complete there. Within, like we were just talking about the Varaha incarnation. And how interesting is that Varaha incarnation, because we have a day-to-day experience of the hog, especially when you go to Vrindavan, you see the hog there. It's just a kind of abominable living entity, but even Krishna becomes one of that, to take earth out of the, which is just so cool. And also you read that he was very beautiful in that incarnation, which is also mind-blowing. It's beyond our experience, really. We can only just imagine, and just imagine what the beauty would have been. And so yeah, Krishna is really quite amazing, and so here it's devotional service, and understanding understanding what impersonalism is, because Srila Prabhupada says that practically the only people who can't appreciate devotional service is the impersonalist. And this is like what impersonalism is, and who is an impersonalist, and how, and Prabhupada was saying that an impersonalist is an impersonalist because of the contamination of the material atmosphere. And this isn't described in the modes of material nature in chapter 14, that these modes of material nature, they have to be understood before we can actually transcend them. So we have just as much a risk of becoming an impersonalist, or if we are probably an undiscovered impersonalist. So so we really do need to learn about how devotional service actually is beyond impersonalism, and the reason why this whole process of devotional service is described here. It's Kapila's instructions on devotional service, and how he's bringing the yogi, the impersonalist, to the platform of devotional service, is because we understand that Krishna is he loves devotional service. And he is his whole pastimes are based on bhakti. So he wants us to come to this platform, and so is Srila Prabhupada. He's wanting us to come to this devotional platform so that we can relish, and we can become relishable, that our activities can become relishable, and then we can understand that what's going on there is, and it's a reality, because when you read different little stories about devotees who have actually had an experience of that association, they are attracted to these details and this intimate service of the Lord. So I'll just read the verse again. Tasmir labda padam chitam savavaya vasamstitam vilakshay kacha samyujad ange bhagavato muni. In fixing his mind on the eternal form of the Lord, the yogi should not take a collective view of all his limbs, but should fix the mind on each individual limb of the Lord. So I'll stop there if anyone has any further points to make.
We've just got to appreciate the meanings and the qualities of, like detachment and all these other aspects that they have, which are so beneficial for this meditation. We're not disturbed by the three modes of material nature. So,
And it's like that example of or that pastime when someone asked Prabhupada, do you smile or are you happy or something like that? And he smiled, but we can appreciate that personality did not understand what the depth of a devotee, that, yeah.
The real love that's within.
Yeah.
Or what's going on inside and what's
Yeah.
going on outside are just completely different
Yeah.
levels.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And we have to really become convinced about it, because sometimes, like you can sometimes go past a group of people and they're laughing, they're wholeheartedly laughing. And you can think, well, that is real enjoyment there. They're really having a good time there. They're really, especially in family situations, Christmas days, and you hear, wow, they're really connecting. But and that's gift. That's Krishna's gift to all living entities. But that's also an example of forgetfulness, because they've momentarily forgotten their anxieties. The anxieties have not actually gone away. Because I got a letter from my spiritual master this morning, and he just made a little comment at the bottom that life is, what was it? It was losing life is regrettable and tragic, but it's not the end. So, so this is a reality that, I'm not sure how it connects to that, but it's just the, I lost my thing.
Life carries on.
Yeah.
So don't be too attached to the externals.
Yeah, that the anxieties are there, but the, to understand, to just develop that. I've just sort of lost where I was going with that thought, but it was connected back there. I think that's a sign that I'm supposed to finish.
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah.
Just that we should appreciate the Parthasarati
Joyce
for giving us this wonderful classes every week. But
Shila
also
Prabhupada Ki Jai.
the really wonderful point that you made, drawing the distinction between a regular Muni who sees things from different angles, forcing themselves to. I've been explaining to Nama Madhurya and Namarichi that, like mathematics is just another way of looking at the world. As in general, mathematics is the language of generality, which is, whereas like mysticism is the language of locality, of things that happen just for one point in time. That's another story. But anyway, but what really makes real leadership and change in the world for the good, like real choice, instead of just sort of competitive exploitation to see who can rise to the top of an exploitation is self-control. And so the idea of the Stita Dira as someone who's literally standing in self-control is what that means. So Dame Swami points out in Searching for Vedic India that all the academic research that we have is spectacular. I mean, we know what to do. The world is not starving from a lack of jnana. We know what we should be doing. We know how to fix all the problems, actually. All the studies have been done. And the problem is self-control, is that there isn't a path, except as presented by Sri Prabhupada, for real self-control. Anyway, so bhakti is that science. It's the both general and local description of how to achieve actual self-control. And because as you very beautifully pointed out, everything is entropy in this world. We're experiencing constant degradation in this world. And what have you gained if you've just increased your perspective through some mental agitation, but without self-control? You haven't really gained anything, nor have you helped anyone else. And anyway, it was a fantastic class. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another weekly
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.